Okay, welcome everybody. Nice to see everyone. I thought today that we would do just a brief review of what we did before, just very briefly to make sure we didn't lose any of the main points, and then do a meditation straight after that to kind of integrate what we've been learning. So that's the approach for today, and then we'll get into some new material and unpack that a little bit. So it's all mind, all the time, consciousness class. It's going to be great. And again, if you have interesting ideas or connections or resistances coming up, please don't lose those because they usually make for a very fruitful conversation. So we'll just do the quick review. And as I go, if there were parts that you wanted to unpack a little bit, please just jump in. Okay, so we talked about why do we study the mind? Why do we study the mind? In Buddhism, it's because there is an intimate connection between mind and karma. And the other reason is that our state of mind plays a crucial role in our experiences of happiness and suffering. So if we want to understand the mechanisms of contentment, if we want to understand the mechanisms of discontent, we really need to understand the mind. And we talked about how, from a Buddhist perspective, the mind uses the brain related to whichever rebirth one is born into, if that embodiment has a brain. Okay, so the brain and the mind are not the same thing, but of course, the mind uses the brain when you have a body that has a brain. And we talked a bit about the wheel of life. So then we got into the nitty-gritty, right? So where does all of this content live in the Buddhist worldview? So if we start with established bases or all phenomena, everything that exists, we can subdivide that into permanent and impermanent, right? And that permanent things are static. They don't change moment to moment, but they're not necessarily eternal. For example, the space inside a cup isn't undergoing change while it exists, but if you fill the cup up with water, that space is gone. So space is not changing moment to moment, but it's not necessarily lasting forever. So these terms are a little bit different than how we might assume them to be colloquially, so it's good to just get it clarified. And then impermanent phenomena do change moment to moment, but may have an eternal continuity, like the mind itself. So in Buddhism, we kind of have a tendency to shortcut and we might say, oh, everything's impermanent, everything changes. And that's not precisely true. It's just that the impermanent things are the things that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. They're the things that come up in our practice, good or bad. So when you hear descriptions in different Buddhist literature about everything being impermanent, there's an asterisk there. There are permanent things. They're just less problematic. So just knowing that. Okay, so we got your permanent, you got your impermanent, all right? So within impermanent, that's where we're talking. Within the category of impermanent things, we have form, consciousness, and non-associated composites. Form is anything that we would normally talk about as form or matter, a rock, a body, the desk, that's all form. That's quite straightforward. Consciousness is the topic of our class, and it is clarity and awareness. And non-associated composites are things that are labeled in dependence upon both form and consciousness, so they're neither in and of themselves. So an example of a non-associated composite would be a person, because a person is labeled in dependence upon form and consciousness, right? So it's neither, because it's both. So those categories, form and non-associated composites, they're not really relevant to this conversation per se, but it's good to know that they exist when we're describing the categories of phenomena. Okay, so consciousness, consciousness, consciousness. Consciousness can be, I guess, understood in terms of the parts of the mind or the aspects or the characteristics of the mind that are reflective, the main minds, the primary consciousnesses, and the aspect of the mind that moves, that changes, that describes, that's the mental factors or the states of mind. So when we talk about main minds and main minds or primary consciousnesses and mental factors, states of mind, we're not talking about two completely unrelated mechanisms. They arise simultaneously, these functions. Yeah, they happen at the same time. So the big category, consciousness, has synonyms. We can say awareness or cognition or mind. And when we say it like that, we mean the big category, not the subdivisions. And that, all of it, everything under that umbrella, has the aspect of clarity and awareness. It's clear and knowing. So this is the big umbrella category. Okay, are you with me so far? Yeah, so far so good, or are there bits that you kind of wanted to check back in about? Did I lose anybody in the brief history of all topics that there are?
Quick question.
Sure.
We talk in terms in Buddhism about impermanent objects, as you referenced. What are permanent? There aren't a lot. Space you mentioned. What else is there?
Well, I guess the most interesting is emptiness itself.
Hmm.
So what emptiness is attributed to is usually an impermanent thing. So for example, the mind is empty of inherent existence. The mind's relative characteristic, clarity and awareness, changes moment to moment.
Right.
But the characteristic of it being empty doesn't. So emptiness is also permanent.
Right.
Fun fact.
Thank
Yeah.
you. That makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, I just recently was talking to Yangzi Rinpoche about this, and I said, "What do we do with that information? Yeah, that the emptiness is completely permanent. What do we do with that information?" And he says, "Don't worry about it." So anyway, grain of salt, but it's just kind of an interesting thing to sit with. That particular characteristic doesn't undergo momentary change. Yeah, yeah. Other thoughts that are popping up just from that kind of cursory overview? Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
Um, Hello, first of all. Uh, yeah, just thinking about the fact that clarity is always there. Um, isn't that great? That if all the other stuff is things that we can move away with practice and with awareness and all of that and learning, isn't it great that underneath it all is clarity?
Yes, it
It's
is.
innate.
Yeah, it is, but it's important that we don't equate clarity with accuracy. Yeah. It's just kind of a neutral characteristic of reflectiveness. It
Mhm.
can reflect. And that is a very important thing for the development of the mind, that it has that aspect of reflectivity, that it can reflect whatever objects come into the sphere of it. But for us, it is usually quite stirred up. So if you think of consciousness as being maybe like water, we want to think of the beautiful mountain lake still on a calm day, free from pollutants, perfectly reflects everything that crosses over it, perfectly reflects the mountains and the clouds and the birds going across precisely. But when it's windy or when there's an affliction present, there's a distortion. And I think that's the thing to keep coming back to, is that for us, we're kind of, under the sway of these ripples from disturbing emotions. And so the way we perceive reality and the way we conceive of things has an element of distortion. It's got an element of mistake. And if we know that going in, it's much easier to challenge your own assumptions and to really ask yourself deep questions about them, because you know it's not the whole story, or not the story that would be there if you had perfect clarity. But the good news is that even a short meditation, the surface disturbances do settle fairly quickly. And especially if you're not having a really crisis time, right? You just kind of let the mind settle. It will come back to that baseline reflective quality. And when it's there, it's naturally quite blissful. Yeah, there's a deep calm and a contentment if you allow yourself to settle. The issue for us is that we're so used to being stirred up that the transition feels weird. Yeah, imagine at the end of a busy day where you've had a lot of errands and a lot of toing and froing and a lot of emails and a lot of human interaction and, all the things. And then you get home at the end of the day. Oh, so nice to be home in the quiet and the peaceful. But sometimes you go straight for your phone or you go straight for the television or straight for a book or straight for the radio and keep yourself at that level of agitation, even though you kind of don't want it, but you're used to it. So we have to start getting that, I guess, comfort level with the awkward transition and know that that transition from a very agitated state to the baseline clarity is an awkward transition. It might have resistance, it might have distress even, it might have fear even, but it only lasts a few minutes. And then you come back to that beautiful baseline contentment and that beautiful baseline reflectivity. So it's interesting to kind of experiment with that. Yes, the gang of three, David, Aaron, Terry. I'll unmute.
Yep, I got it. It's Terry. This isn't directly related to what you were saying, but when I was reading the article the background reading that His Holiness was delivering to Harvard, he keeps referring to subjective mental and cognitive states of mind. And I don't think I understand what the difference is between the mental and the cognitive state of mind. I don't know if that's important or not.
I have to reread it to be certain because translations have changed a lot over the years, but he might be talking about the function of being able to cognize as opposed to what is cognized. Yeah, the ability to be conscious of something as opposed to the object that you're conscious of. Could be that distinction, but it's a good flagging because I should reread it. It's a beautiful article, but it's been some time. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. So really the whole topic of minds and mental factors or consciousness, we're talking about functions of mind. We're talking about a subjective experience, we're to ourselves the subject having an experience. We're describing that and trying to understand that so that we can start to tweak it to work for us better. The objective reality out there, that is a much deeper conversation. And that's where we get into the nature of reality and the conversations on dependent arising and the way reality functions. So that becomes a very interesting conversation of what is objectively there. And there are many different opinions about that. Yes, Dana, is it?
Hi there. How are you doing tonight? I in some of the reading, and honestly, I forget which author it was, but there was a lot about concepts, and it was on on meditating on the clear light nature of mind and the idea of letting go of the concepts of even what observing the mind would be like letting go of color and shape, etc. So I'm doing this meditation, and the more I let go of those concepts, the more I started to sort of freak out a little bit because there was nothing to grasp onto.
Yeah.
Right. And the idea, I think in the reading, it kind of had an analogy about flying or driving and how mechanical it can be if you're not used to it and you're tight. And about once you loosen, I'm using the wrong words, but there's this flow.
Yeah.
And maybe I kind of saw it, and somewhere in I kind of experienced it. And in somewhere in that, it, it, it you had also mentioned, I think last week, that that clarity is not emptiness, right? Those are two different things. So I don't know. I guess when I've done this in the past, I kind of thought that was emptiness or a glimpse of it, I suppose. So I don't know if you could address that a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the mind's relative nature is its clarity and awareness. Its ultimate nature is its lack of inherent existence. So to actually connect with its lack of inherent existence, requires a certain amount of like legwork and some fundamental kind of understandings about the philosophical tenet schools, at least in a cursory way. But what you're coming to the conclusion of in brief is that the mind did not come out of nowhere from nothing, and it's not self-perpetuating. So that not, right? Not from nowhere, not self-perpetuating. You're looking for the not, which is a non-affirming negation. And so it becomes a bit squirrely to put your finger on it. More on that later, right? But it's an interesting concept. The relative nature of the mind, its clarity, has a spaciousness to it, a beautiful spaciousness to it, which is emptier than usual, but that's a whole different framing of the word empty. And when you're doing these kind of meditations, what you're trying to do is not empty out the mind, but to allow the volume to naturally turn down. Yeah, because if you don't feed your thoughts, they slow down their momentum. Yeah, and when they slow down their momentum, you get more spaces where there's not words. It doesn't mean there's no conception there, but the conceptions are no longer verbal, chatty, busy. They settle and settle and settle. And when His Holiness talks about the clear light nature of mind, what he's talking about is the fundamental consciousness that is really only accessible to us in the deepest of meditations or at death. Yeah, so it rises naturally at death, which is quite good news for the person dying because it's a tremendous relief to not be distracted by the senses. And, the person dying is out of pain. They're happy in their fundamental consciousness and the clear light mind. If you've meditated during your lifetime, you recognize that clear light mind as lacking inherent existence, and you can make quite a fundamental shift in your practice that will greatly benefit your future lives. But for most people, it arises, we don't recognize it. It's a nice moment of relief before we're on to the next life. And we've done it countless times. And there's various other times during a lifetime where it'll arise briefly, like if you sneeze. But this clear light nature of mind, what we're talking about is the subtlest level of mind, the very subtlest level of mind. So when the conversation in minds and mental factors, we're talking about one level up, right? So the coarse consciousness is normally operating with the senses. The next level down, the subtle consciousness, is operating with the mental consciousness. So that you can access through meditation already. And that is very much like that flow state that you described, like when you're driving a familiar road. Do you know the feeling of, I don't know, if you're learning a piece of music or if you're learning a play, say you're a basketball player and you're learning a play, or a football player, you're learning a play, or you're strategizing something that requires a lot of repetition, a lot of drilling. And in the drilling stage, you have to think about the steps a lot. But then when you get to showtime or game time, you can't think about the steps too much or you'll lose it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be in the flow state, riding the wave of your previous familiarity. So that flow state is a lot what we're talking about with these meditations, where you're trying to get into that slipstream flow of your consciousness just unfolding naturally. But as soon as you turn too firmly into it, you ruin it for yourself. And you will, and that's no problem. Just let go again. Yeah, you just go again. So it's a process of releasing and releasing. And you're going in the right direction if it's getting spacious, but not spacey. If you're getting relaxed, but not sleepy. If you feel very focused without stress. Because
Okay.
those pairings go together differently in our life. We can be focused, but we're usually stressed. We can be relaxed, but we're also sleepy, right? You can be kind of, in this spacious mind, but you're also off with the fairies. We're trying to make different associations in this meditation. But it's fairly simple once you get the hang of it. It's just getting the hang of it, like learning the steps of some sort of new piece of music.
Mm-hmm. That was super helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Damien.
Please unmute them.
Hello.
Hey.
Start again. I might be completely off with this question, but I'm curious if consciousness can be considered permanent ever if we're transitioning life, or into different lives?
It's the consciousness is not permanent in the sense of static, but it is eternal. So it's a continuity of consciousness that lasts forever, but within that continuity, it's changing moment to moment to moment. So if you think of it like a river, and the river changes states or changes country and it gets a new name, but it's still a continuity of that same river. That's how we think of going from one life to another. What's happening here is informed by what happened back here. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, so then we do the breakdown, and we talked about the 5 omnipresent mental factors when we're talking about mental factors or states of mind. So omnipresent in the sense that they're there all the time. And this is the meditation that we're going to do. We're going to focus in on see if we can kind of feel what these guys are about. And so just to review, there are 5 elements essential to any state of consciousness, however gross or subtle they may be. They constitute the inherent makeup of cognition, without which it could not function. So they happen spontaneously. You don't need to make them happen. They're always there together with consciousness, and all 5 are always there. But they're going to be related to whichever main mind is dominant. So if your I primary consciousness is dominant, then feeling, discernment, intention, contact, and attention in its retinue are together with it. So feeling experiences the results of our past actions. This is where karma is ripening. Karma ripens in a lot of places, but our current feeling right now in this moment is a ripening result from the past. So feeling experiences. Discernment apprehends, differentiates, and identifies objects. This doesn't necessarily mean in words. It's able to distinguish between, solid and fluid and space, like an animal can discern these things even though they don't have words. So this function of discerning or discriminating between things is always present. Sometimes it gets married up with words that explain it to yourself or analysis that does something with it, but this is always happening. So discernment recognizes. Intention is action, mental action. This is where karma is created. So old karma is experienced with feeling, new karma is created with intention. So intention doesn't need to be intentional, right? You don't have to grab the reins and direct the mind somewhere for it still to count as intention, because what it is movement. The mind moving towards or away, the mind wanting or having some will or volition. It's stronger karma, the stronger you motivate that intention. So if you decide to do something on purpose, that intention creates a much stronger karma than the kind of, for lack of a better word, passive intention that's operating all the time, even when we're a bit oblivious or on autopilot. So intention moves. Attention focuses the mind. It holds or lands. Yeah, it captures something. It's what you're mainly attentive to. Yeah, so you may have a very clear focused attention, or you may have kind of a spacey, vague attention, but it's what you've generally landed on for the time being is attention. And then contact is the quote outside meeting the inside. It's the cause of feeling. So when, say, for example, when eyes come into contact with form and color, there's form and color out there. Then you have your eyeball, your eye sense power, and your eye consciousness meeting that form. And that contact gives rise to feeling. So it connects outside and inside. Okay. So we're going to do a meditation on these and see if it comes clearer. And so if you want to start by just getting yourself a nice posture, one that feels straight back. And just kind of settle for a second into the body. And we'll use that very normal body relaxation as the pivot point for this particular meditation. So you don't need to look at the screen unless you lose the thread. But what we're doing is consciously emphasizing tactile or touch primary consciousness, the physical feeling. We're consciously saying that's the one we're spotlighting. And then of the 5 omnipresent mental factors in its retinue, what are they up to? So just be in the body without worrying about what's happening to it for a second. Just be in the body. And you can be kind of like a tourist of your own physical experience, starting with the top of your head, just investigating what it feels like around your scalp. You might gently invite your forehead to unfurrow, the brow to smooth out. You might nudge your eyebrows down into their natural position. Allow the jaw to unclench. All the muscles of the mouth to relax. Gently closing the mouth. And move your awareness down your neck and throat. Stabilizing and straightening. And move your awareness across the tops of your shoulders, back and forth, encouraging them to drop into their natural position, allowing them to balance themselves. And bring the relaxation down your arms and through your torso, all the way to your seat. And relaxing through the hips and down both legs. Imagine any tension leaving out the toes, dissolving into space. Keep awareness of the body. And try to isolate feeling. Does the body feel pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? Generally, right now. See if you can isolate just the feeling aspect that experiences. You're not trying to change that experience at all. You're just aware of it. If the body feels uncomfortable, you simply know that. If it's generally neutral, simply know that. If it's feeling pleasant, you simply know that. Just observe that experience. And simultaneous with feeling is discernment. That part that recognizes the body from the other parts, the part that recognizes the feeling or sensations. So see if you can watch discernment discern the way it may separate or categorize, distinguish, and recognize. Just watch that very mechanism play out. Able to be with the body, able to discern the feelings. Look at that discernment itself. And you mentally highlight that function. And simultaneous with feeling and discernment is intention that moves towards recognizing, that moves towards that recognition, noticing, feeling. That factor that intends, that volition. Can you mentally highlight that function of mind? The others continue to play out, but just see if you can notice intention, that movement of mind away or towards. Right now it's moving towards discernment, recognizing, feeling. Feeling, being with the body. Intention moves and attention lands. Intention may want to hold or may want to escape. All of this simultaneous. See if you can isolate that function of mind that's attentive to or holds, lands. Maybe it's attentive to the feelings, Maybe it's attentive to the sound of my voice. See if you can isolate that function of attention, that mental engagement. And simultaneous with those is contact, connecting the stimuli of the body with the body consciousness, from which arises feeling. A feeling is discerned as good or bad, which seems to mandate where attention moves towards. Noticing that. Becoming aware of the physical sensation. Feeling arising. Discerning what that feeling is. And from that, intending this or that. Focused or attentive to this or that. Which then directs what you come into contact with again. In a way linear, but really simultaneous. Each with their own continuity, responding off each other. And then let your focus shift from emphasizing the tactile or touch primary consciousness to the more subtle mental primary consciousness. The mental primary consciousness, like the sky, also has the 5 omnipresent mental factors, which are like clouds, moving and changing and bumping into each other, all different types of weather. Because of course it's not just the 5. There are many other things, positive, negative, and neutral, within the mental factors as well. So rather than get into the specifics, just see if you can discern a more subtle experience of consciousness, the mental primary consciousness, the one not associated with the senses. See if you can just be with that reflective aspect. There's also a moving aspect, but try not to get distracted by it. More with the sky, less with the clouds. mental feeling might capture your attention. Your mood, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Just notice it and release your attention on it. See if you can stay in spaciousness, alert and present, without anticipating, without reminiscing. Just here in the natural reflectivity. Discernment might be aware that you have a lot of words or not many words. It may discern that you're generally calm or a bit agitated. It may distinguish or recognize any number of things. Just let discernment discern without giving it special attention. Come back to the reflectiveness. Come back to the sky. And your attention might start to lose strength, wondering what it is to focus on. And your intention might keep trying to pull it back. And your contact may struggle with what to find. Or it may all be relaxed and unworried. Just let those mental factors tick along naturally, without interference, just like weather. And keep coming back to the spacious clarity naturally there, that exists at the same time as all that movement. And gradually allow your focus to relax and release. And intentionally finish the meditation and re-engage your primary consciousness. All right. So coming back, sky not the clouds, right? No problem. It's not usual that we, I guess, describe every kind of cloud. And, we didn't describe every kind of cloud, but we did the main ones. And you don't really have to remember a list like this more than just your general impression of how there's many things happening simultaneously. And the question becomes, what do you have control over in any given time? Certain days, there is nothing you can do about your feeling, whether it's your physical feeling or your mental feeling. Your body just hurts or your mind's just in a bad space. So that's not the area to put your attention. Pivot and ask, what can I do to educate discernment to think differently about this suffering? It could be that when you come into contact with certain situations or certain people or certain substances, negative states of mind arise or positive states of mind arise. Say you come into your shrine room or you come into your Dharma center and you light incense and you turn on the altar lights, and all of that contact triggers a positive seed for happiness. Then come into contact with that more often, right? But, similarly, if you have an addiction and being with certain kinds of friends or certain scenarios makes it more likely to happen, choose not to come into contact with that while you build your strength, for example. Intention is ticking along all the time, just doing its thing. But if you motivate it, you can make your karma more powerful. So say you're just driving to work, right? And you're kind of on autopilot, intending to drive to work, but you're just doing it because you have to, right? You're driving to work and you kind of perk up and you realize there is choice. And you say to yourself, I'm intending to go to work. Whatever job, good or bad, you have, whether you like your job or not, you think, may everyone I come into contact with today have a benefit from me. May everything I do today create this bigger momentum to develop my fullest potential for the benefit of all sentient beings, et cetera, et cetera. So you're like taking the reins of your intention and you're expanding it. And now you're doing externally the same old thing you've done 100 times, but with this bigger purpose, with this deeper, bigger karma. Yeah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But how did that meditation go? What happened for you guys? The body and then pivot to the mental? Was one easier than the other to kind of highlight different components? Was one more fun? Still in meditation?
I just um, I'm searching my word now. When I'm still in my body sensation, it's very it's not abstract, and then thought comes and boom, I go away, and then like a anchor, the sensation of body helps me a lot.
Yeah.
Like fatigue or a little bit like scratch. Oh, I'm coming back to it.
Yeah, there's something about directing your attention that has a nourishing or nurturing quality. There's something interesting to experiment with there. Like if you've been neglecting the body all day and you're getting dehydrated and you're getting achy or whatever, and the pain kind of wakes you up into, oh, I have a body. I should look after it. And then you drink some water and you have a good meal and you sit down for a second. that all helps that drinking water, that sitting down, but also the attention itself. Just the attention itself coming back to the body is like giving care to it, or shifting your attention consciously to the mind itself has a nurturing, nourishing aspect. It's interesting. There's something healing about being present to your own experience on purpose, and something less nourishing about when you're just on autopilot, going through the motions, kind of half there, living the half life. So it is interesting, even something as simple as, how does my body feel? Starts to make it feel better than it did a moment ago. Might get worse for a minute because you're like, oh yeah, that knee really does hurt. But then, give it a minute. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, other thoughts or impressions? Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to put my hand up. It was kind of strange. A couple of minutes in, I wasn't aware that I had a body at all. It was shapes and colours and things. And then a few minutes, I got very, very cold. So I had to stop, and you're talking about clouds. I've got the whole sky on the outside of my clouds. So
Yep.
I'm yeah. So
Some unexpected things happened.
I think so. I think
Yep.
that's probably an accurate description. And I'll just throw in there that before we started, I had some chocolate cake, because I know, having watched some of the videos from some of your colleagues, chocolate cake is essential to Buddhism. They talk about it all the time, but I don't think I'm going to do that the next time, and that's me. I've learned.
Immediate happiness, long-term.
Yes, karma. Yeah, not doing it again. Oh.
Well, and sometimes what can happen is, excuse me, sometimes what can happen is that wanting the meditation to go well or having an expectation can sometimes make you tense up, which can make you get too hot or too cold because you've stressed yourself with too much expectation. That can happen. Who knows why that happened? It could have been just the sugar crash from the chocolate cake. True story. It's happened.
And it's 3:45 in the morning.
Oh, that'll do it. Yeah, that'll do it. Hard to regulate
A
temperature.
very human reason.
Absolutely. But when you're noticing unexpected things happen like that, it's coming back to again and again, your approach to the meditation is as important as the content of the meditation. So if you're treating the meditation as a chore or a pressure or a performance or anything like that, then you're going to make it a lot harder for you to actually access the content of the meditation. But of course you have expectations, otherwise you wouldn't sit down and try, so it's tricky. But if you can bring this like curious, I'm curious to see what happens if I try this. Let's see what happens if I try this. And you go in with just a really no pressure kind of playfulness about it. That can really help. So your approach to meditation is as important as the meditation topic. Dana F, am I saying that right?
So yeah, I really enjoyed the meditation, and I think I was having a hard time with the concepts when you were teaching, but when we did the meditation, it actually helped me to understand. But I went through a lot. I think I got really heated, so maybe that was me kind of putting a little too much pressure on myself. But I really, really enjoyed thinking more about the concepts in this way than you talking about it. Just sort of kind of put the pieces together. So
yeah, you're like the scientist to your own self then. You're kind of, yeah, you're your own guinea pig and you've got a little internal clipboard going, it's quite good. Yeah, poor guinea pigs, bad example. But you know what I mean. Yeah, it's important to do this kind of process where we talk about the wisdom that arises from hearing, the wisdom that arises from contemplating, the wisdom that arises from meditation. And what, you can only really hear so much before you need to process it. So in Buddhism, we process it either through like analytical meditation or discussion or debate or journaling, right? That also works. So, whatever you need to do to kind of take what you've understood intellectually and like mull it over. And then when you come to some clarity with it, then you can meditate on it. So then when you meditate on it, you notice what is very clear and what can integrate and digest, and what isn't clear and you need to circle back to the next time you hear and are in class and want to ask about it. It's just kind of like cycling through those processes. Dharma students, we when we're getting frustrated, we're usually stuck on one, and we need to try another approach. So it's good reminder for that. If you're getting lost in content, don't add any more content. Go to processing. If you're trying to meditate and you can't meditate, go back to reflecting, do you really get this beast? So use your Dharma Center friends if you are around people that are up for a good conversation and play with these things, because it really, really helps. If we were all in a monastery and we were in Asia, especially in a Tibetan monastery, say in like Dharamsala, we would be debating and debating and debating and debating. And that's what the monks and nuns do, is they have class the first half of the day and then they debate the whole rest of the day and then have prayers and sleepy time. So and we can manufacture that with our friend group in whatever way is culturally appropriate, just a fun discussion. So when you look at these just in their simplest form, do you have any
Sorry,
questions?
I think Steve has a question.
Oh, sure, go ahead. Yeah. Please.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. It was very peaceful and not really focusing on each detail of the steps, but the process which you got to this peaceful state, talking through it, calming. A lot of the times when I try and meditate, it's on the breath, and my body was very relaxed. My mind was at peace. I'm in a very quiet, peaceful place on the ridge top in the top of Felton.
Beautiful.
And yeah, so I'm looking out across the horizon, and my thoughts go to a clear glass lake with a blue sky, zero wind, calming, peaceful, and it was wonderful. It was very different. I'm not advanced in meditation and focusing on little aspects of it, but seemed to be very calming, and took you to a place that I think I really enjoyed.
Oh, good. Good. I'm glad. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And if you want to do this by yourself, but you don't want to be looking at a list or thinking too much, but you still want to get to the essence of it, one of the advices that Yangtze Rinpoche says a lot is be in non-reactivity. Non-reactivity. So it's like you're very aware of whatever is arising within you, but you're not agreeing with it or disagreeing with it. You're not pushing it away and you're not chasing it. You're just kind of like, sensation arising. Huh. Right? Like, discerning this or thinking about that or focused on this, focused on that. Huh. And it's not like you don't care at all, but you don't care enough to chase it. That non-reactivity. So that's a shortcut way of doing this if you're leading yourself. Just kind of sit and be in, all right, let's watch what arises and choose not to chase it. Let's watch what arises and choose not to suppress it. Let's let things play out in their own way. And, you know, being in this way is part of the reason why some meditators, like there was a, you know, great fable or a great rumor in the FPMT, our organization, that Lama Zopa Rinpoche never slept. And whether that's true or not, he certainly slept less than your average bear. And why would that be? And it's because if you're meditating well, you don't have to recover from the present, right? You don't have to recover from your life at the end of the day. You're letting things digest in real time. You're letting things process in real time. And that means your need to have that kind of recovery is very different. But for us, it might be that actually, as we start to become more present, more centered, we might actually need to sleep a little more, because finally the body is going into recovery mode and the mind is going into recovery mode. And you're moving out of this kind of stress time that you were just living in for years. So never force yourself to sleep less. But if you start getting really good at your meditations, you might find that naturally you don't need to as much, or that you're a bit sparkier in the morning. So it's something interesting to play with, is just kind of what happens if you let the mind recalibrate once or twice a day, even 5-10 minutes, and just sit in that place of bright, clear, non-reactivity. Let the mind reflect. Don't chase the reflections. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, other thoughts about those 5 that are always there before we do any of the others? Does it make sense that they're all there simultaneously and they're interacting off of each other, right? Yeah. Okay. So we also have the 5 object ascertaining mental factors. And you'll see the list goes on with 11 virtuous mental factors, 6 root delusions, 20 secondary afflictions, and 4 variable mental factors. These 51 mental factors are like the classics. It's not an exhaustive list. Right. And you're like, darn it, I was hoping it was the whole list, but no, 84,000 different delusions. Oy, right. 80 natural conceptions. You do not need to memorize these lists or know these lists. What's helpful to understand is the essence of each of the categories, and the subdivisions you can just check when you're curious. But to know the categories is more important than to know what's in those categories. So to know that there are omnipresent mental factors, there are ones that are there all the time, and then there are ones you sweep into them that really color your experience. Because those 5 on their own are just not, they're not positive, negative, or neutral in and of themselves. They need an add. Yeah, they need love and kindness and compassion, or they need anger, or they need attachment, and that colors them a certain way. Yeah, but in and of themselves, those 5 are just neutral. And the same is true of the second list, which are not omnipresent, but they're object ascertaining, which means they come in handy if you're really wanting to develop your meditation practice. The last set that is also neutral without other accompanying mental factors are these 4 variable ones. So the ones that are neutral until someone else jumps in are the 5 omnipresent, the 5 object ascertaining, and the 4 variable. So these are kind of interesting to explore, particularly for meditators. So the object ascertaining mental factors you can add into the mix, right? And is good to add into the mix. And it's interesting to look at them from the perspective of being strategic in focusing, concentrating better. Aspiration takes a strong interest in an intended object and is the basis for joyous effort. Okay, so aspiration is, of course, aspiring to whatever it is, like you would normally use the word. But if you're asking yourself, when I meditate, why don't I meditate? Right? You're sitting there, you're in meditation, and you're off with the fairies, or you're thinking of the shopping list, or you're ruminating, or you're trying to finish a verse of a song in your head, or you're doing anything but meditating, but you're sitting in meditation. What will help? One of the things that will help is having a very clear aspiration, which is basically like saying, give it your interest or let it capture your attention. So whatever you're meditating on, if it's not interesting enough, it's very hard for you to stabilize your attention on it. So you have to make it interesting for yourself outside of meditation time. You have to talk to yourself in a kind of reflective way, in a, just a gentle and analytical way about why is this important and what's the benefit of it? Or what's the disadvantage if I don't do it? So let's take something really simple like a single-pointed meditation on the breath. Now, single-pointed meditation on the breath is not the only single-pointed meditation. And for people, particularly if you have a lot of trauma in your background, breath meditation might not be the best thing. You might want to do clarity of the mind, or you might want to focus on a visualized image. But say it's a single-pointed thing like the breath, you're meditating on it, and you're settling and you're sifting, and then you get bored. Yeah, you get bored because the breath is just breathing. So what? And then you drift. Of course you drift. How do you give it aspiration? How do you tune into it and give it your interest? You needed some preliminary work about what is this for? Why am I doing this? I'm meditating single-pointedly in order to develop stability of mind and depth of concentration. Depth of concentration, stability of mind. Why, though? Why? I can get away with not having more concentration than now. Why? I can phone it in. So then you have to go a little deeper. Why do I need more concentration? Well, let's think about all of the mistakes in my life, or just one of them. How about? Would I have made such a mistake if I had been more focused in that moment? Right? I often think, like, of the mistakes of my life, 99% of them I would not have done if I'd been a bit more focused. Yeah. Maybe 1% I really meant to, and I was very focused doing it. And there was, like, I don't know, a lash of sarcasm that was wishing to wound back when I was an adolescent. Sure, sometimes we plan it, right? But most of the time, we really don't want to hurt each other. We don't want to hurt each other. We don't want to do the wrong thing. We don't want to make mistakes. We don't want to back into someone in a parking lot. We don't want to, but we do because we're distracted. Do you feel that, right? That most of your mistakes are from distraction. If you'd been focused, you wouldn't have done it. So that gives you a sense of, oh, right. So if I'm focusing on the breath or a mental image or the mind itself, whatever I'm focusing on, that kind of meditation is building strength in this faculty I desperately need. Yeah. More focus, less mistakes. And you think of the other side, you do the stick, now do the carrot. All right, what's the carrot? Well, who am I to my friends when they talk about my qualities that they love? Would all of those qualities be more so if I was focused? Right? Say that they love that I'm kind, or they love that I'm funny, or they love that I'm a good problem solver, or they like that I'm the one that'll navigate, or choose whatever it is your friends appreciate about you. That will be more and deeper with more focus, yes? Right? More and deeper with more focus. So what you're already good at, right? The things you already are loved for, those things will be more and better and stabler and more consistent with focus. Okay, so you do a little stick, you do a little carrot, and you think, all right, it's in my best interest to develop this. What's the best reason for developing concentration? Well, with the stability of concentration, all the way to calm abiding, Shine, this very high meditative state, I'll be able to bring back analysis, and that analysis won't disturb the stability of my mind. And those two coming together, calm abiding, special insight, will pop into an actual realization, a fundamental shift. I'll actually achieve a type of mental stability that I won't slide back from. And I can do that with qualities like bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. I can do that with things like loving kindness and compassion and make them so stable that I don't backslide. And that feels like a project that's worthwhile. And that can continue all the way to my mind's fullest development, Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. So that's like amazing, but is going to take a while, right? So you want to have the amazing, going to take a while plan, but also just today in this moment, You will get a lot more that you value accomplished internally and externally if you're less distracted. You'll hurt yourself and others much less if you're less distracted today in this moment, right? So, make it palpable and present and real for yourself, and make it aspirational and large and leading to this cosmic big quote goal of enlightenment both. And then come back to your simple old breathing meditation, see if you can hold still better, because you front loaded it with aspiration. Does it make sense? Right? So rather than like whipping yourself into submission and saying, just focus, you could do that for a while, but it's much more effective to remind yourself why you want to, why you love it. And a lot of these things you already knew, but to bring them forefront really helps lead you back to where you want it to be. So aspiration is really, really useful when you're trying to develop any kind of mental transformation whatsoever. Just aspiring and really thinking, how do I give it interest and purpose and remember the benefits? Yeah, it's the basis for joyous effort. Basis for joyous effort. So joyous effort is really loving what you're doing, having, quote, delight in virtue, but it's loving a positive activity such that even though there's effort, you enjoy that effort all the way. Does that make sense? So that's one of the ascertaining mental factors. And you can invite it into the mix, but it's not necessarily going to be there without effort. You need to invite it into the mix. And appreciation is what stabilizes the apprehension of a previously ascertained object and holds it in such a way that it cannot be distracted by another view. Okay, so that's very fancy language, but appreciation is a word we get. Appreciation stabilizes. So something that you've already believed in, a previously ascertained object, something you already understood, it holds it such that you can't be distracted. So think of something very ordinary, like if there's a beautiful rainbow outside because it's just rained and the sun is out and there's this beautiful rainbow and you appreciate the beautiful rainbow. There could also be the sound of traffic, but you're not distracted by it because of how much you appreciate the rainbow. You know, an example like that. So it's not like you're oblivious to the fact that traffic exists, but it's not pulling your focus because appreciation is dominant. Yeah, so you can bring this idea of appreciation into your meditation or into your positive work or into an important conversation, right? It doesn't have to be just the realm of meditation here. Appreciation can be brought into all of these things. So say you've already really come to recognize, I don't know, a positive communication strategy. Maybe you love nonviolent communication, or maybe you're someone who loves Gestalt or blah, 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 blah. You love a communication strategy, you've learned it, you're well familiar in it, and now is a hard conversation in front of you. Because of your appreciation of a certain system, it keeps you and holds you oriented differently than if you just went in cold with your normal habits. For example, use whatever example you like, but is it making sense the way appreciation can kind of help stabilize your attention? Yeah, object ascertaining mental factors. Very interesting. Then we have mindfulness, and I think it's important to flag mindfulness because lots of people who meditate in any context think they know what Buddhists mean when we say mindfulness, and it's been somewhat co-opted by popular culture. Mindfulness from a Buddhist perspective is repeatedly bringing to mind a phenomena of previous acquaintance without forgetting it. It does not allow the mind to be distracted from the object and is the basis for concentration. So it's repeatedly bringing to mind something you've already understood. It's coming back again and again to a certain orientation or a certain plan. So if, say a meditation teacher says, good to be mindful all day, every day, in session, out of session, on the cushion, off the cushion, be mindful all the time. what you can think is, oh, that must mean that I just have to know what I'm doing while I'm doing it. I'm brushing teeth, I know I'm brushing my teeth. I'm walking, I know I'm walking. I'm washing the dishes, I know I'm washing the dishes. And we can kind of leave it at that, but that's not the point. The point is to have mindfulness with an agenda, right? With an agenda that observation of your life playing out is colored by your plan. And your plan is altruism, right? Your plan is bodhicitta, right? So you have bodhicitta mindfulness. So now you're brushing your teeth, thinking of working for the welfare of all sentient beings, right? Now you're washing the dishes, thinking to work for the welfare of all sentient beings. Yeah, it's mindfulness with an agenda. It's not a passive mindfulness that just watches what you're doing while you're doing it. You're trying to watch to see, do I need to correct something? Does it make sense? So, you know, it's observational. You are watching what you're doing while you're doing it, but it's colored by, I'm watching to see that I don't come off my path. And so you need to know what your path is for sure, right? Is my path peace? Is my path kindness? Is my path bodhicitta? It's really up to you. But the mindfulness is just checking to see if you're slipping or not, or if you need supports or not. It's that kind of background noticing. So it's like conditioned introspection, you know, colloquial introspection, right? Where you're just self-aware, but you're self-aware with an agenda. Because there can be people who are very self-aware and it just turns into self-consciousness. And then they get really kind of fragile and brittle and don't want people to look at them and are always worried what they look like and get really vain and all sorts of silly stuff can play out. Yeah. So it's not self-awareness in and of itself. It's with this agenda to make sure you haven't fallen off course. Yeah. Thoughts about that? This word mindfulness that gets bandied about. So it can be on cushion or off cushion, but in this context, it's not forgetting a virtuous object, basically, or a virtuous plan or something like this. Yeah. Clear? Yeah. Ish. Yeah, good. Yeah. So obviously helps concentration. And then you got concentration, which is quite straightforward, dwells one pointedly for a sustained period of time on a single object. And then wisdom functions to discriminate precisely with analysis the qualities, faults, or characteristics of an object held by mindfulness. So all of these guys, whether all of them or a couple of them, whatever combination you like, really act as a way to re-educate discrimination, which is there all the time, whether you want it to be or not, right? You always have discrimination, but what discrimination will do is ride the wave of habit. And so to re-educate it, you need to bring in these other mental factors. You need to educate yourself differently about what it is you're coming into contact with, right? So you come into contact with yelling, screaming individual A. If you're kind of new in the world, you know, say you're, you know, teenager and you have had a very sheltered life and you see a yelling, screaming person, your natural, meaning habitual reaction might be anger or fear, which is perfectly rational and is missing quite a bit of nuance that we all recognize as an adult. So if you see a yelling, screaming person, they're probably angry or mentally ill or in a great deal of distress or pain. Already more options are opening up to you, which means your immediate reaction might not be anger or fear. It might be care. But that only comes from having conditioned your discrimination through the experiences of your life. It's not like you sat down and schooled yourself. It's the learning that comes from life if you allow it. But in meditation, what we're trying to do is to orchestrate those life lessons to come quicker and stick better so that you don't have to wait to be old to have wisdom. And that if you are old, you don't lose your wisdom, right? All of these things, you know, so it's one of these things where it's like catch the lesson, don't lose the lesson. Catch the lesson, don't lose the lesson. Again and again and again. this re-educates the mental factor of discernment so that your immediate reaction to things has a lot more nuance than black and white, which is in turn going to allow better states of mind to have the opportunity to arise and more happiness and more skillful means to flow on from that. Does it make sense? So it's just, how do I re-educate myself using wisdom, using concentration, using aspiration, appreciation? How do I use mindfulness the right way? And you don't need to remember all 5 of these. You just use them as information to pay attention differently. What is the way I'm paying attention to my life? What's my agenda for paying attention to my life? Things like this. So these 5 are, generally speaking, neutral until you bring in a positive motivation like loving kindness or compassion, but they very much are part of what facilitates learning. And these come into play also if you're used to this chart, right? Some of you have seen this many times of the monk and the elephant and the monkey and the rabbit and the stages to developing single-pointed concentration. So Shine, single-pointed concentration, calm abiding, this is something that is gradual, right? Gradually, you're developing mindfulness and all of these things. So we could go into a whole giant chart about this, but we won't today. We'll just look at the easy way, right? So the easy way is to look at this chart in a 3-dimensional video way. And so if you think at the very bottom, in the bottom corner, there's a little house. Yeah, see the house? And that's a monastery that represents the determination to be free from samsara, to be free of cyclic existence. And so you are the monk. You're the monk setting out to break this habitual pattern. But the problem is you've got laxity and excitement. You've got the elephant and the monkey, and they're completely out of your control. Yeah, so you're chasing, trying to get control over heaviness and excitability, right? Laxity and excitement. And there's these sensory objects, these little dishes of fruit and things like this. And the fire is the effort that's needed. But with effort, you can see he's starting to slow down, and the monkey and the elephant are starting to lose that heavy blackness. And with the 2 tools of mindfulness and introspection, he's starting to tame his own mind. And then this bunny appears of subtle laxity, which also starts to get under your control. And so now you're actually ahead of your laxity and excitement. The tendency is still there, but it's not overpowering you. And eventually, you actually lose that excitement. The monkey is subdued, you leave him behind, and now all you have is the tendency towards laxity, which even more comes under your control with time and effort. And really, it's something that requires almost no effort by this stage until you finally leave that behind. So the elephant settles, the elephant of your own mind, right? And here is where you're achieving the type of single-pointed concentration that no longer requires effort. No longer requires effort. And from there, you're able to actually ride the elephant to the form and formless realm mental stabilizations. So this is a very short explanation of the 9 stages of mental abidance, or the progress to Shine. But I hope it can kind of like inspire you to know that this image is ancient. It's hundreds and hundreds of years old. And the fact that the beginning is hard has always been the case. It's not a new thing that starting out is difficult. But the good news is it gets easier and easier and easier. So in that image, the fire at the beginning is the biggest, meaning the effort at the beginning is the most, but it's going to get easier. Okay, so those are the object ascertaining mental factors. And the last ones are just these 4 variable mental factors. They're super easy. They're variable because they're positive or negative or neutral based on whatever else is there. And that's where we get sleep, regret, investigation, and analysis. So those 4 are neither good nor bad nor neutral until something else comes into play. So tonight, try to make your sleep virtuous by setting a positive motivation. And it's good to have regret if it's constructive, but for its own sake, it just falls into guilt. It's good to investigate things in a coarse way, but not if it's just picking and nitpicking out people's faults. And analysis is good, slightly more subtle, looking at the details of things, but only if it's strategic in developing the spiritual path, not trying to make weapons more efficient to kill more people, right? So those ones are quite straightforward. Right, so we'll go ahead and call it a night, but do you have any questions or thoughts or things that you'd really like to go into next session? I can do a bit of a pivot. Far so good, just keep trucking along. Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, a quick question before I fall asleep. What on earth made that guy run after the elephant and the monkey? I would have said, look, wherever you're going, enjoy yourselves. I'm sitting here peaceful. Yeah.
It's a metaphor.
Well, now you tell us. Now you say. I mean, yeah, that's me.
Yeah. Yeah, Sam, go ahead.
Could we possibly next time talk about this concept of impermanence, how it's from the point of view of emptiness, that it's a wrong view. It's permanence from a point of view of shunyata is a wrong view. Is that correct?
Innate grasping at permanence is certainly problematic, yeah, and certain types of grasping at permanence are wrong views. That's true, yeah. But the fact of something being permanent is neither good nor bad as long as you attribute that characteristic accurately, right? So if you think the self is permanent, that is definitely a wrong view. Yeah, so if you're curious, we can unpack a little bit of permanent, impermanent things a little bit more. Absolutely. Yeah, that can be really useful. Thanks for that. Yeah. Yeah, Dana, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe next time, I know we kind of went through it pretty quickly, but having a positive motivation before you go to sleep, I'd like to hear a little more about that maybe next time.
Yeah, and maybe we can do a little like sleep yoga talk. Yeah, because that's all in the realm of developing the mind. Yep. Excellent.
Thank you.
Motivation and sleep, permanence, impermanence. You got it. You got it. Yeah, Jai?
You touched on the concept of space. I'm wondering also if you would touch on the concept of time, where that fits in.
Yeah. Fun fact is that it's another non-associated composite. Time is non-associated composite.
I'll need that
Yeah,
explained.
Yep, time is fun.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. All right, well, we'll go ahead and dedicate. Oh, let's see. I think there's one in the chat. Let's not mix it. Oh, it's just thank you. You're welcome. All right. Janchu semcho rinpoche ma ke panam ke gyochi ke pan yamba me pa yang gone gondu pelwan sho. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that is not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Okay. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, babe.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.